There is a written blueprint to structurally overhaul the global trading system and reshape the US dollar. It's not a rumor, it's not a leak, and it's not a conspiracy theory. It is a published macro document with an author, a specific timeline, and clear policy markers. I have been following this exact thesis since October 2024, right when that framework first made its way into the light. If you look closely at the global stage right now, the early phases of this chess match are executing exactly in order. In the next 10 minutes, I am going to map out all 10 steps of this strategy with the exact receipts, the tariff actions, the policy shifts, and the structural realities on the ground. Then I will give you the single strongest argument against this framework, because if this thesis is correct, you should be able to watch the pipes fill with water yourself. Let's look at the data. First, let's look past the mainstream noise. The financial media loves to focus on political theater. They view macro events as isolated, chaotic headlines. They see a high dollar and call it an accident. They see a tariff and call it an isolated trade war. But if you look at the architecture of institutional policy, it doesn't operate on random headlines. It operates on sequence. The framework authored in late 2024 wasn't just a policy paper. The architects behind these concepts were positioned directly inside the advisory apparatus of the White House to execute it. What we are tracking is a highly calculated, multi stage strategy designed to achieve two things: a complete domestic manufacturing renaissance and a massive devaluation of the real sovereign debt burden. To get there, the system has to pass through 10 precise phases. Let's walk through the map. Phase 1, the inflation shield. Step 1 is the opening gambit. Broad tariffs are imposed. But let's be precise about the mechanism. These tariffs are not designed as an isolated permanent wall. They are implemented to acquire immense global economic leverage, force trading partners to the negotiating table, and temporarily shock capital right back into the greenback. The receipt, your series tariff action data. The leverage was established exactly as mapped. Check. Step 2 is exactly where the retail macro channels are getting completely tripped up right now. The blueprint explicitly states that the dollar must strengthen aggressively during the initial tariff period. Why? Because a surging dollar acts as a domestic shield. It deliberately suppresses the massive consumer inflation shock that those new tariffs naturally trigger. Look at the literal data on your screen. The US dollar index didn't collapse. It spent the first half of 2026 staging a powerful recovery, hitting a 13-month high and consolidating firmly right around the 101 mark. This isn't a failure of the thesis, it is step 2 executing perfectly. The strong dollar is absorbing the tariff shock right now. Check. Step 3 is the catalyst that breaks the currency's upward march. The blueprint requires an external energy or major geopolitical shock. This shock is critical because it provides the entire global economy with inflation cover, while simultaneously creating the friction necessary to trigger a structural dollar weakening cycle. The receipt. Look at the escalating structural pressure across key energy straits and global supply chains. This is the exact turning point we are watching right now to transition the dollar from its shield phase into its next major cycle. Phase 2, coordinated devaluation. Once the inflation shield has done its job and the geopolitical cover is established, step 4 begins. The dollar starts a sustained structural weakening on a trade-weighted basis. The initial strength was the armor. The weakening is the actual weapon, because a cheaper dollar is the only mathematical way to restore American export competitiveness on the global stage. This is where the paradigm flips. Watch for this pivot the moment the energy shock dynamics take hold. Step 5 is total alignment at the Federal Reserve. You cannot engineer a coordinated currency devaluation if the central bank is running an independent, hawkish agenda. The receipt, the formal transition of leadership at the central bank, with Jerome Powell being replaced by a highly compliant Fed chair, Kevin Warsh. The fiscal and monetary sides are now officially under one roof. Step 5, check. Step 6 alters the fundamental machinery of the bond market. The new Fed chair moves to cap yields, initiating formal yield curve control. Why? Because as the currency begins its structural decline, the Fed must step in to artificially suppress interest rates to prevent exploding interest payments from breaking the federal budget. This is the ultimate defensive wall for the domestic bond market. Step 7 shifts the burden internationally, utilizing intense energy and security duress as direct leverage. Global allies are effectively coerced into absorbing ultra long term U.S. liabilities, specifically 100-year century bonds. The U.S. uses its position as the ultimate energy and security guarantor to force foreign capital to lock themselves into long term sovereign debt on Western terms. This replaces traditional open market treasury demand with captive geopolitical demand. Phase 3, the endgame. Step 8 solves the liquidity equation as foreign sovereign central banks pull back from purchasing U.S. debt. To replace that missing sovereign demand, the system triggers mass retail stablecoin absorption. By routing everyday retail capital directly into highly regulated yield bearing stablecoins backed by short term U.S. treasuries, millions of global retail users unconsciously become the new foundational buyers of American debt. The plumbing shifts from sovereign foreign reserves to decentralized retail liquidity. Step 9 is the stabilization phase. Domestic inflation finally moderates and levels off. The controlled intentional devaluation of the currency is finalized, having successfully inflated away a massive portion of the debt burden without triggering a hyperinflationary spiral. The plumbing settles into the new economic normal. Step 10 is the final destination. With a structurally reweighted currency, locked in long term yields, and completely rebuilt domestic energy and industrial infrastructure, the ultimate goal is achieved: a massive U.S. manufacturing renaissance paired with a profoundly lower real sovereign debt burden. The doomer narratives tell you the dollar is going to zero. They don't understand that this isn't a funeral, it's a calculated corporate restructuring. Now, let's look at the single strongest argument that this entire framework is wrong. The objection is simple: it's classical pattern matching. Governments are always tweaking tariffs, currencies fluctuate constantly, central bank chairs change, and financial technology always evolves. If you write down 10 broad macroeconomic steps, random reality will eventually look like it's confirming your thesis. It's the financial equivalent of astrology. It is an incredibly fair point to make. But here is why this specific framework separates itself from macro astrology: the strict sequence. The events aren't just happening, they are hitting the tape in the exact chronological order laid out in the 2024 model. The specific function of the high dollar. Most analysts looked at the high dollar in 2026 and said the model was broken. But under this exact 10-step map, the strong dollar is a mandatory requirement of Phase 1 to act as an inflation shield against tariffs. It is entirely falsifiable. Personnel realignment. The literal architects who designed these trade and currency strategies are the exact personnel running the Council of Economic Advisors and the Federal Reserve. I hold this framework the same way I hold any investment position, with an explicit list of invalidation criteria. If the dollar fails to turn after a clear geopolitical shock, or if the bond market breaks past yield caps without the Fed intervening, I will map out those failures cleanly. That is the agreement on this channel. The current scorecard as of right now: Step 1 is executed. Step 2 is actively live on your screen as the DXY holds strong to protect against initial tariff shocks. We are actively monitoring the horizon for the Step 3 catalyst. Every video in this series deep dives into one specific step of this plumbing. Consider this video your strategic map. I update this scorecard publicly every quarter, accounting directly for what I get right and exactly where the market deviates. We connected these dots long before they hit the front page headlines. Hit subscribe and you will see the next structural pivot before the market gives it a name.